Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, DC After Dobbs, the future of abortion rights in DC. My name is Melissa Wasser. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the policy counsel at the ACLU of the District of Columbia. I'll also be your moderator for tonight's event. We'll get started momentarily, but first, some quick housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and everyone is in listen-only mode. Closed captions are available for this event. If your captions do not start automatically, you can access them by hovering your mouse over the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom window and clicking Show Subtitles. Before we dive in and introduce our panelists today, I want to start with a few acknowledgements. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the stolen and abused land that we occupy in the Washington, D.C. area. The Piscataway Indian Nation and Piscataway-Conoy Confederacy originally lived in large parts of present-day Maryland and D.C. They were among the first in the Western Hemisphere to encounter European colonists, and beginning in the early 1600s, white European settlers killed or displaced them into Northern Virginia and Pennsylvania. Those who stayed remain today in the Southern Maryland area. At the same time, thousands of African and African American slaves were held, bought, and sold on the land that we occupy today. The District of Columbia was an active and profitable slave depot, with slave auctions dotting the National Mall and groups of chained slaves passing in the view of Congress and the White House every day. We honor the Indigenous and Black lives that were taken by violent colonization and state-sanctioned brutality, as well as the enduring strength of these Indigenous and Black communities. And we commit ourselves to turning this knowledge into action by fighting white supremacy in all of its forms. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about the future of abortion access in the District of Columbia. The Dobbs decision has opened the door to criminalizing abortion. We are now witnessing in real time states turning abortion access, which is a public health issue, into a crime. In DC, though, good news, abortion is still legal, and pregnant people can get an abortion at any age and at any stage of pregnancy in the district. DC has a long history of making safe and legal abortions accessible to both DC residents and people coming from other states to get this critical health care. Abortion rights in the district, though, are vulnerable because DC is not a state. Congress has the power to restrict or even ban abortion in DC, despite the fact that residents and lawmakers overwhelmingly want safe and accessible abortions without restrictions. Together, we have the power to protect and expand abortion access for everyone in the District of Columbia. At ACLU DC, we're supporting council bills that protect and expand abortion and gender-affirming care. We're also organizing to finally make DC a state. Today, we'll hear more about the landscape of abortion rights in the district and how to ensure we advance reproductive justice in DC. We also want to recognize today that this can be an emotional topic, and we want to create a space that's full of respect. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat using the Q&A feature. While we will protect your freedom of speech, please note threats are not protected speech, and anyone making threatening comments may be asked to leave the webinar. And now, let's introduce our panelists this afternoon. We're thrilled to be joined by Allison Tombrose-Corman from the DC Abortion Fund and Betsy Harned from Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington. Allie is the Operations and Strategy Director with the DC Abortion Fund. Allie, thanks so much for being here today. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your work?
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really pleased to join you all. As Melissa said, my name is Allie. I use she, her pronouns, and I am with the DC Abortion Fund, or DCAF. I've spent my whole career in various aspects of sexual and reproductive health and rights and justice and public health initiatives. And it's really an honor for me to be working in this role at DCAF. I think that there's never been a more challenging time to be doing this work, but there's also never been a more exciting time. So I'm really thrilled to be here.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And just very quickly, to support the DC Abortion Fund and their work, you can go to dcabortionfund.org/donate. Now, Betsy. Betsy is the Vice President of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, D.C. Betsy, great to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work at Planned Parenthood?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for the invitation. And it's such a pleasure and a privilege to be on the panel with both of you. As was just mentioned, my name is Betsy Harned. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Vice President of Public Affairs with Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, D.C. For those of you who aren't familiar with the local Planned Parenthood, Metro Washington, D.C., we are the local provider that serves the whole metropolitan Washington area. So we have a health center in DC. We also have health centers in Montgomery and Prince George's County in Maryland. And we serve the whole region, including parts of Northern Virginia. We're actually the oldest and largest provider of family planning services in the DC area. We've been around for 85 years. I've been with the Planned Parenthood of Metro Washington for almost 5 years, and we focus our work in the Public Affairs Department on policy, including some of the same bills that the ACLU is supporting right now in DC Council, as well as organizing work. And it's really a privilege to be here. Thanks again for having us.
Yes, and thank you both for joining us. And to support our local Planned Parenthood affiliate, you can go to weareplannedparenthood.org/a/abortion access PPMW. Great. So let me get into this conversation. I'm so excited to have you both here. I'm going to start with a simple question, but how did you and your staff feel after the Dobbs ruling came out? How are you doing? Even though, I think we all knew, especially after the SCOTUS leak, that this was coming, I remember feeling sad and very shocked. I went down to the Supreme Court and exercised my First Amendment rights to protest. But how did you and your staff feel knowing that the court had just denied millions of Americans their constitutional right to abortion? Allie, if you want to kick us off.
Sure, happy to. And I apologize. I skipped my about decaf little intro for you all. So for those of you, before I answer your excellent question, Melissa, I'll just say, for those of you who are not familiar with decaf or with abortion funds, abortion funds are a network of grassroots organizations all over the country that exist to help people struggling to access abortion care. So really, we fill that financial gap for folks who are seeking abortion care but may not be able to pay for the full cost of their procedure. And abortion funds are scrappy and resourceful and really make this work happen and stretch every single dollar that is given to them to cover abortions. DCAF is, we serve the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, and we get around 6,000 callers a year and grant about $100,000 a month for abortion funds. And we're seeing those numbers both in callers and need for financial support increase dramatically throughout COVID. And as you can imagine, now that we're seeing the post-Dobbs world. To answer your question, Melissa, it's an interesting question because I think that day was one of the best and worst of my professional life. Personally and professionally, I think I probably felt the same way a lot of you all did, or maybe all of you did, which was absolutely gutted in my stomach, in my heart. It was a brutal day. But the reason I say it was also one of my greatest professional days is because the DCAF team just jumped into action. There was no time to really sit with those feelings for more than just a moment because there was so much work to be done. And so to be part of a team that was working on the ground to be responsive the minute the decision came down, to harness all of the anger and the sadness that folks felt and be able to channel that into something positive made it one of also the best days I can imagine as someone who works on these issues.
Great, thank you. Betsy?
Yes, a lot of similarities here for sure. So as you mentioned, Melissa, we also had the leak, the day of the leak. So it felt like we went through this twice in some ways. And the leak felt like this real gut punch for so many people. And that because it invoked this incredible fear about what probably would happen, which of course now has indeed come to pass. And so much of a combination, this range of emotions for folks in terms of rage, fear, sadness, and a ton of confusion as to what does this really mean. And then fast forward to the day where the decision actually came out, and more rage, more sadness, more fear, and a lot more confusion as well. And interestingly enough, we are a provider, of course, so we're seeing patients all day, and knowing my colleagues in the health center, knowing that the patients are also going to be having this range of emotions, and the providers are going to be having this range of emotions. And it was also professionally for the public affairs and communication staff who jumped into it in terms of making sure that people knew what was going on. Our call center had the information they needed to be able to field patient questions, and going out and raising our voices at the Supreme Court. It was also, as you mentioned, Ali, professionally, really an exhilarating day in a way, especially having had a preview a few weeks before. So quite the range of emotions. And that range of emotions, in our experience, really continues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope both of you have, also taken the time along with your staff to take care of yourselves as well, because this is really difficult work. And I kind of want to move over to the work now. Can you both talk about some of the work you've been doing to support people seeking abortions in DC and in the greater region? I'll say here at ACLU of DC, last Thursday, we supported 2 bills in front of the DC Council that would help enhance abortion access and protect reproductive health care providers who do provide these services. And we're going to continue to work on those bills with the council staff during the recess. But how has the work changed since the decision?
Betsy, do you want to go ahead, and I'll jump in after?
Sure, I'm happy to. So a couple of ways. First of all, working also on those kinds of bills. It's really important that we do everything that we can in DC and in the whole region, because abortion remains and will remain, if we have anything to say about it, legal in DC and in Maryland and Virginia for those in the suburbs. We need to be leaders, and we need to make sure that we protect access as much as possible. So we're also supporting those bills, and there are many bills that are pending in DC right now, including those that specifically are going to protect providers from the antics of these other states where like Texas, where there's been the bounty hunter law in effect since September 1. There are real consequences potentially for providers who either have licenses in those states where abortion is being banned, and as well as licenses in states and the district where abortion is legal. And so we're making sure that we work on as many legislative initiatives as possible to be able to enhance protections for folks who provide in DC and provide to folks in the area. As a provider, we also, we've all been waiting for this, unfortunately, and preparing for this for a long time. And as a provider, among the things that we have been preparing for and doing right now to support those seeking abortion in the region is everything from expanding our telehealth services to make us more accessible for people throughout the whole region, to expanding our service lines at our actual health centers and continuing to move forward and expanding our bricks and mortar services as well. We're in a position where we need to expand to make sure that the need is met. So those are a few different ways. We also are happy and trying as much as possible to support abortion funds to send people to DCAF and other abortion funds. And then for those who are interested in donating to Planned Parenthood Metro Washington, we've established our own fund internally too, if they want to put the money specifically towards abortion services for folks. So anything that we can do in that regard, as well as continuing, these kinds of programs and all of our communications efforts to try to help normalize abortion out in the ether, that drive home the message that abortion is healthcare and this needs to be destigmatized and normalized. Those are a few things. Allie, thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. I feel like I'm just going to parrot everything you said, because absolutely yes to all of that. But that's probably not a very satisfying answer for attendees. So I'll dig in a little deeper. So yeah, we've been working kind of on every front to make sure that we are continuing to serve our callers and their needs as much as we possibly can. That is and will remain our number one priority, is being there to provide these services for our callers, for folks who are seeking abortion services and coming to the DC area to get them. For me, in my role as operations and strategy director, that looks a little bit different than, let's say, someone working with Betsy, providing actual care. I am working really hard to understand the risk landscape and to make sure that we can continue to operate as an abortion fund and direct people to services where they are accessible and in ways that keep them safe and keep DCAF, its board, its staff, its volunteers, and its callers safe from any risk that they might face of, punitive, either civil or criminal actions. So that's a big part of the work right now, is for us to just understand, as we work with folks in Maryland and Virginia and in states all across the country where decisions are being made every day that open and close doors to access, trying to figure out how to direct patients to services like PPMW where they can still access care. So that's a really big part of what we're trying to do right now. The advocacy piece, as Betsy mentioned, is incredibly important. We were there testifying with Melissa and folks from PPMW for the City Council. We're talking to the Attorney General's office for the District of Columbia, as well as other folks at the state and federal level, to try to understand how we can bring the perspective of our callers to them to inform the work that they are doing. We're doing a lot of community engagement right now. So panels like this, speaking as part of a documentary film that is being produced about abortion, just trying to get out into the community and let as many folks know as possible that abortion funds exist. They're such an amazing resource. And my biggest concern is that folks won't know that there are places that they can go to get this financial support for the abortions they're seeking. And to Betsy's final point, normalizing the conversation about abortion as much as possible, making sure that folks know that this does not need to be, nor should it be, a stigmatized event. This is healthcare and everyone deserves it.
Absolutely. Thank you both. And it's essential healthcare is what it comes down to. And I think that's the message we really need to drive home. And, because abortion is now being criminalized across the country, that means, again, this public health issue is now going to be subjected to the horrors of the criminal justice system, that also disproportionately impacts BIPOC communities. That includes also dealing with more things like mass surveillance. Currently, there's really nothing stopping MPD and other district agencies from sharing surveillance data that could help other states enforce abortion bans and restrictions. And no one should have to live in that kind of fear of constant surveillance when they're trying to make decisions about how to get health care. I know ACLU DC has a campaign around mass surveillance that you can find out more about going to acludc.org. But the question I really want to ask y'all is, for people coming to the district that are seeking care from these states where abortion has now been criminalized, there have been, trigger ban laws that have happened because of Dobbs. What are some other ways that folks should be thinking about how to protect themselves from those aspects of criminalization. And Allie, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. I mean, you certainly touched on one, Melissa, which is the kind of digital footprint. And as probably the worst technology person on the planet, I don't know that I'm particularly well advised or well positioned to speak to the best ways to do that. But I know there is a ton of information out there about kind of managing your digital footprint. And I would say for folks that abortion is legal in the district. And so coming here to seek abortion services, you are exercising a right that you are legally entitled to. And I think just knowing that, having that information, having the power of that information is incredibly important. I talk about this all day long, and some days I have to take a beat and remind myself, nope, this is well within the bounds of what is legal, what is appropriate, and we are not putting, we would not put anyone in a position to increase their risk of, as I said, criminal or civil penalties. That's just not something DCAF would ever do, nor would the providers, you know, as I'm sure Betsy would speak to. They're going to operate from every patient's best interest. So there's a ton of resources out there. New York Times has a tracker. If RoFel is a tracking website where you can kind of keep up to date on what the current status of each of these states is. But I think just having that knowledge of, you know, here in the DMV right now, this is still a legally protected right is really important.
Yeah, Allie, completely agree, and just want to echo that the main takeaway is abortion is legal in DC, as well as in Maryland, as well as in Virginia. You can, and if you need care, should consider coming for an abortion any place that it's legal. It is legal. The only other thing that I'd add, besides that, you know, I might be the worst technology person on earth, so I might challenge you on that. Besides that is, of course, any provider too, subject to HIPAA, confidentiality, all of those protections continue, and it's easy in this state of affairs to have fears that sometimes we don't remember some of the protections that we do have, but everybody is entitled to confidentiality and their patient information to be protected. So please, for you and for your loved ones, abortion is legal. Our doors are open.
Absolutely. So I guess now let's talk a little bit about the future. Now in a post-Dobbs world. What concerns do you have about the future of abortion rights, especially when, you know, how they're going to impact the district? We have upcoming midterm elections. There's always a chance, just to be transparent, lay it all out on the table. There's always a chance a new Congress can come in and say, hey, we want to restrict or ban abortion in the district, because again, DC is not a state. This is why I know ACLU-DC is pushing so hard on DC statehood. If you want to find out more information on what you can do to help us get DC statehood, please visit dcstatehoodnow.org. And so that's, you know, one of the concerns we have, but what concerns do you and your organizations have moving forward? If we can start with Betsy.
Sure. Well, statehood is the big one, for certain. And just as one example of how that plays out now, actually, Melissa, I think you mentioned it at the top of this panel. You mentioned that DC Medicaid is not able to provide funds for abortion. You mentioned that in the beginning.
I didn't actually get to that, but please, if you'd like to speak on it.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
People should know.
Forgive me. So one of the things, DC statehood, for so many reasons, it is important. There are over 700,000 people in this city who are denied the opportunity to have a vote in Congress. Complete disenfranchisement disproportionately impacts people of color, BIPOC folks. It is absolutely unconscionable that people who live in DC and pay taxes are not able to be full citizens and have be able to vote and have 2 senators and a fully voting member of Congress. But on a day-to-day basis, there is a real also barrier to access to reproductive health care in DC because of statehood. In DC, it is the will of the people through their elected officials that DC Medicaid be able to provide coverage for abortion services like some other states do. And yet every year Congress interferes with an amendment during the appropriations process and prevents DC from spending locally raised tax dollars. For those of you who live in DC and pay taxes in DC, like I do, our tax dollars that we want to go to be able to have somebody who has their insurance through Medicaid be able to have abortion coverage. Congress, folks that don't represent us at all, step in the way. And so I think that is, in terms of concerns we have about the future, I think the concerns, many of them do revolve around statehood. It's the idea that, Melissa, as you're mentioning, that we could have a change in Congress and change in the presidency, and then a ban could be imposed, or other bad laws could be imposed on DC because we're not a state. But also these nefarious and lesser known things like the interference with the appropriations process, or the interference because Congress oversees DC's budget and can do those kinds of things that can really wreak havoc on people being able to access healthcare, so that folks in Congress can maybe score some political points back at home in an anti-state. So that definitely is, among the biggest concerns. Allie?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what you both said about statehood, and it's one thing to think about how does DCAF serve the folks who are calling us when we're based in an area where abortion is legal, but if that suddenly changes overnight, that leaves a huge question mark for DCAF on how do we redeploy our resources to serve as best we can with those limitations. So it's frankly a terrifying thought for me. Not that we haven't already come to a terrifying place, but there's always room for more. And I would add, one of my biggest fears is the ways in which folks who do not believe in the right to abortion access will try to harm patients and providers who are providing this essential healthcare. I don't know how else to say it. I fear that they are going to be targeted in any number of ways, be it meritless lawsuits, criminal charges, God forbid, their health and safety. It's really frightening for me, knowing that in a perfect world, or even in a world a year ago, some of these court decisions, which we thought, would never allow things to legally happen that have never happened before, extraterritorial reach, that folks from one state could reach into another state and apply their state laws to someone who is outside of those borders. That should be something that, based on precedent, should not be allowed to happen. But then again, we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. So that is a genuine fear of mine.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you. And I mean, I've been trying to explain this to everybody. It's like we're all on this boat in uncharted waters because we just don't know, what's really going to happen. And if you kind of extend that out about DC statehood, right, it's not just about anti-abortion, right? They're not going to stop with abortion. It's going to be, coming for access to birth control, access to gender affirming care, to marry who we love, or even to vote. And so I think that's really, really important surrounding statehood. And I know we did get some questions, so I do want to just end very quickly with, what do you want people to do to support your organization and strategies around reproductive justice. Again, I will just plug acludc.org/donate. If you're interested in learning about DC statehood, you can go visit dcstatehoodnow.org. Allie, I think you're up first.
Sure, thanks. I mean, I'm sure folks are well aware, but supporting your local abortion fund, whether that's DCAF or another fund, is critically important. We're so grateful for what we and other folks are calling the RAGE donations, the post-leak, post-Dobbs donations. They're incredibly helpful. As I said, we stretch those dollars very, very far so that each one goes to providing an abortion. But what's even more important, or I would say useful to us, is becoming a recurring donor. Even if it's $5 a month, being able for us to be able to plan moving forward, say, knowing that we have X amount of dollars coming in every month in an ongoing way, it just helps us be so much more planful than a one-time blip. Although we're grateful for the one-time blip, please don't think otherwise. We encourage folks to become a recurring donor, to host a fundraiser themselves for DCAF. We have a toolkit on our website that makes it really easy to walk you through how to host a fundraiser. We're always looking for Spanish-speaking case managers. So if folks have that skill set, we would encourage you to reach out to us and let us know, because that's a really incredible way to give back to the community. And just to continue, I would say to not forget that this fight is happening every single day. It's really easy to feel impassioned. I shouldn't say easy. It's really front of mind to feel impassioned about this when it's in the headlines, but this issue will continue to be a fight for as long as we're here to fight it. So please keep it front of mind as much as you can with all the other things that are fighting for front of mind space in all of our heads every day.
Thanks so much. Betsy?
Yes, so many things that you can do, starting with what you're doing right now and getting informed and participating in panels like this. And I would say the number one thing that folks can do, we're going to sound like broken records, but really giving to abortion funds. And it's something that we've heard a lot of folks have asked us over the past few months. I know, but I'm not really a donor, or I'll just give once, I want to do something else. We have other things that people can do. But the number one thing is, if you have any resources, $5, or if you have more resources, the number one thing you can do is give to abortion funds right now. That is advocacy. It is advocacy to give to abortion funds as much as you are able, and to promote and talk with your friends about your networks about the importance of giving to abortion funds, and how that right now is advocacy. And it always has been, but that's the number one thing you can do. Also, in terms of participating in the normalization and destigmatization of abortion, storytelling, telling your story, encouraging others to tell their stories, sharing with all of your networks that you are a supporter, encouraging others to continue to normalize. And then there are lots of opportunities to raise your voice in terms of volunteer opportunities. Planned Parenthood Metro Washington has volunteer opportunities. I know that there's some floods right now with volunteers seeking to come out, but there's lots of volunteer opportunities. And then there are the times, make sure that you're on the lists of all of the organizations that you support, so you get their action alerts, who support reproductive health care. And show up when you can, and encourage others to show up when you can. It's just so important that this drumbeat continues. And it's never going to be fair how things are portrayed in the media, but there are all these stories about a couple days after the Supreme Court, look, nobody's there anymore. It's like, okay, but we need to continue to do the actions and consider what is best for you. One of the things that we talk about at PPMW a lot is there's so many different ways to get involved, and there's no one way that works for everybody. So if you're interested in, going to a rally and making a homemade sign and participating in a march, that's great. Please do so. If you would never do that, although I did see at a recent march a sign that said, this is so bad that even introverts are coming out. But if you're not, if it's still not your deal, could you write a letter to the auditor? Could you ghost write a letter to the auditor? Is there a text out the vote when the time comes? And this is not a political event today, but encouraging folks to make sure they're registered to vote, that kind of thing. Anything that fits with you, there are opportunities, and we'd be happy to talk more if you want to reach out.
Thank you both so much. And I will plug it again because I will take moderator's privilege, but to donate to these organizations for DC Abortion Fund, please visit dcabortionfund.org/donate. I can confirm it's very easy to set up a monthly recurring donation right on the website. Same goes for Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, DC. To donate to their abortion access fund, please visit weareplannedparenthood.org/A/abortion access PPMW. And we're also going to throw those links in the chat for y'all to just click directly. So please support. And again, dcstatehoodnow.org to learn what you can do to help support DC statehood. So we are going to take some questions from the audience now. If you are an audience member and you have some questions, please submit them using the Q&A function or use the chat, and we'll make sure that we get to your question. So we did have a couple, pre-registered questions, and a lot of them are surprisingly around DC statehood. One question reads, since we are not a state, can Congress impose their decisions on us? Can Congress overturn DC-based efforts? And who are our allies? And so, again, I just want to, I'll kick us off, and I'm happy, whoever wants to go next, but, DC is not a state. Congress has oversight over both the DC budget and our laws through congressional review process, and they have regularly restricted the use of public funds for abortion care. We are a federal district, so that means we lack this same level of autonomy over our laws and budgets that states have. So members of Congress, which I think Betsy pointed out, none of whom are elected by DC voters, can strike down or repeal laws that they don't like and can dictate how we spend our money. We talked a little about the Dornan Amendment, which is the only legal restriction saying Medicaid cannot pay for abortions. And just to point out, in 2019, BIPOC folks made up 81% of people who got abortions in DC. And the Dornan Amendment is a racist and classist restriction, which means that BIPOC folks in low-income communities have to jump through these significant hurdles to access abortion care, which again is essential healthcare. Again, we're just really concerned that if an anti-choice Congress comes in, again, it won't stop at abortion. It will go to other issues that were also mentioned in the Dobbs opinion by Justice Thomas. We have to make sure that we are in the best position to save ourselves as a district. And I really, really hope that voters in other states can really take a look at this and push for DC statehood, because that is one of the main ways that we're going to be able to overcome something like this. Betsy, Allie?
Sure, yeah, I guess I would that was terrific. Thank you, Melissa. Maybe add a couple of things to illustrate a little bit. First of all, so a couple of years ago, and some of you may have participated in this advocacy in DC, we all worked to help pass what was called the Strengthening Reproductive Health Protections Amendment Act, which is a long title for an act that basically says that there can be no governmental interference in somebody's reproductive health decisions, period. There can be no government interference in accessing reproductive health care in DC. It passed unanimously in the DC Council, thanks to advocacy of folks on this panel, and I'm sure in the audience. And it represents absolutely the values of DC. But because we're not a state, should the votes be there in the future, a total ban could be put on DC. And so here we have this law that is absolutely what reflects the will of the DC voters and the values of DC, and that can just be completely undercut because we lack statehood. In terms of the question about allies, you know, the House has passed now more than once DC statehood, and there is a majority in the current House. It is passed, and the President Biden, has indicated support for DC statehood. The Senate, we are shy of the votes that we would need, and with the filibuster, significantly shy of the votes that we would need. And so there are a lot of allies that we have that are in the current Congress and the presidency. We need more. And DC council members are also allies for statehood and very outspoken. The mayor, who proudly signed the bill that I just mentioned, preventing governmental interference with access to abortion. So we have some strong allies. They need to hear from us. We're always hearing from those who support us in elected offices that they need to hear from us, even though they're already on board, because they constantly hear from our opposition. And we need to remember that their phones are blowing up from folks who are anti-reproductive health care. And so they need to hear from us and have us also hold them accountable and grow even more allies.
You all said it beautifully. I don't have anything to add.
Absolutely. I will keep us moving because questions are still coming in. Another question that we had, we did talk about the DC council bills. Someone asked, you know, where are they in the council process? Support do we have for these bills, sponsors, opponents? So I can try to give a brief overview, and I think both of you testified alongside us last week, and so I'm happy to have you guys go over some of that testimony too, and talk about why you support these bills. But right now, there are two bills that had a hearing last week in the Government Operations and Facilities Committee. The first one is Bill 24-0726, and I did send to our team to post some links in the chat for folks who want to read the bills themselves. But that is the Enhancing Reproductive Health Protections Amendment Act of 2022. It was introduced by Councilmember Christina Henderson, an at-large member, and this bill would protect those who support and assist individuals seeking to self-terminate a pregnancy, and it would also shield folks who provide, dispense, or transfer any product used for self-managed abortions, you know, outside of the traditional healthcare system, getting FDA-approved pills that are safe to use. And so that would protect those folks there and anyone who would help assist them in that process. And we do support that bill. I also, we can post our testimony as well for ACLU DC in the chat. There's also the second bill is Bill 24-808, the Human Rights Sanctuary Amendment Act of 2022. And this was introduced by Councilmember Brianne Nadeau of Ward 1, and this bill actually has the full support of council. Councilmember Henderson's bill has about 10 of the members, which no one is opposing that we know of, but this 24-808 gives full support of council, which is a really great sign moving into the fall. That bill would help make DC a human rights sanctuary for people seeking abortions, contraception, gender-affirming healthcare. You know, if they're engaging in lawful sexual conduct or are in LGBTQ+ relationships, this bill is trying to hit on all of the issues and protect all of these issues that are, you know, vital to the issues that Justice Thomas raised in his dissent about substantive due process rights that maybe we should reconsider. We want to make sure that we are doing what we can to support these bills. We did show our support of these bills last week, and they are currently in recess at the DC Council. We are waiting until I think mid-September for them to come back, but we are currently working with council staff to strengthen these bills as soon as we can. And of course, just the disclaimer, ACLU DC and the ACLU are nonpartisan organizations, and we fully support the right to abortion access and reproductive health care. And we will continue to work with the council to get these bills to enhance abortion access in the district. Allie, Betsy?
That was an amazing summary, Melissa. Thank you. DCAF was there. We were testifying on behalf of these two bills. The sanctuary piece of it, I think you explained beautifully. That's obviously a priority for us to keep DC a place where people can, obtain abortion services. I'll just add on the other legislation, the self-managed abortion legislation, one of our big concerns that leads us to support that legislation is the fear that, like so many other things, the criminalization of self-managed abortion would be disproportionately leveraged against folks who are marginalized, against Black, Brown, Indigenous folks with fewer resources, really folks who are going to be targeted for any number of other reasons that I think heartbreakingly we all see every day. And so part of our impetus for supporting this legislation was to help make sure that wouldn't be possible, right? That this couldn't be yet another weapon used against folks for managing their own healthcare.
Thank you both. That was beautiful. We were proud. Our medical director actually testified on behalf of both the bills. I also just wanted to mention that that particular hearing was brought forth by Councilmember Robert White, which the committee chair, who also has 3 other bills pending right now that we're also supporting, and you might be interested in looking into. It's another great way to participate and to volunteer is if it might be something that interests you to do hearing testimony. The DC Council is doing all of their hearings, I believe right now, virtually, and you can sign up just as a public witness if you're a DC resident or part of an organization that supports the bills to testify, or you can do written testimony. So there are a few bills that are pending that don't have a hearing date yet, but hopefully will soon in other committees that Robert White has introduced. One of which is a medical malpractice related bill, and one of which is a licensing bill, both to help protect providers right now. So if there is with one of these states, if they have one of the states where there's a ban, if there is a judgment, for example, or some sort of adverse action with respect to a provider in those states, and they're also a DC provider, that in DC, their medical malpractice insurance wouldn't go up and their license wouldn't be impacted. There wouldn't be any impacts for them as a provider in DC if another state took action against their licenses, because it's completely against our values. We want providers to provide abortions to people who need abortions. And so there are a couple of bills that focus on that. And then also a bill that focuses on insurance coverage for those who have private insurance to have no cost sharing for abortion. And that's something that some other states have and would be great. We're supporting for DC to have as well to continue to increase access.
Awesome. This is a great conversation. I see we have 5 minutes left, and I do just want to highlight, because I think I did misspeak about Justice Thomas. It was not a dissenting opinion, forgive me, it was a concurrence. I'm living in a land where there's another majority, apparently, just to let folks know on the call who might not be lawyers, but Justice Thomas did write a concurring opinion in the Dobbs case, which is an opinion that agrees with the majority opinion. The majority opinion in this case was written by Justice Samuel Alito. So this concurring opinion agrees with the majority opinion, but it doesn't agree with the rationale behind it. So even though Justice Alito, I think, put a line in the opinion that says, quote, nothing in this opinion should be understood to cast doubt on precedents that do not concern abortion. What Justice Thomas is saying is that he's now writing a separate opinion that will describe his legal basis for his decision to say we should review all substantive due process rights. So while Justice Thomas doesn't have the votes today or when Dobbs came out, it's still a little bit of ringing the alarm for advocates, because if, again, it starts with abortion, it could extend to other rights as well. Concurring opinions are not binding, because they didn't receive a majority of court support, but they can be used in the future by lawyers as persuasive material to change law to make that a majority opinion. But that was just a concurrence, but it is something to keep an eye on as well. I guess just one, maybe two more questions. What have the out-of-state numbers really been like for folks seeking care? I think in 2021, I think it was like 68% of abortions in DC were given to patients who were out-of-state residents. And I was wondering if there was any influx in out-of-state patients since the Dobbs decision.
I can just speak anecdotally about that, because it's still really early to tell. And to be honest, we at DCAF are really careful about not asking questions that we don't need the answers to. It makes evaluation a lot more difficult, but we don't want to create any additional hassle for folks who are calling by giving them a whole slew of questions, as much as we might want to ask certain things so we can understand who we're serving better. So some of those things include where are you coming from, and other questions such as that. Anecdotally, I can tell you that we are definitely seeing folks who are trying to navigate this, kind of like landmine of changing state laws. We always have folks coming to us from out of state, folks who are coming to DC because it's one of the limited places in the country where you can seek later term care. And so we generally have a lot of folks coming to us from out of state, and we're hearing from our case managers that we are getting requests for solidarity support. That means other funds calling us up and saying that there's still a financial gap that needs to be filled, and can DCAF support that? And we're seeing folks coming from Texas, from Oklahoma, from other states where it's difficult to get care. Quantifying that would be harder, but I know our case managers are seeing it.
Great. Betsy?
Yeah, all I'll add is that it's also anecdotal at this point because it's early. We've definitely seen, anecdotally, but we've definitely seen an uptick in calls, lots of inquiries, people trying to figure this out. I mentioned before, lots of confusion. So lots and lots and lots of inquiries. What that translate into actual patients coming and being served, it's just premature to really know.
Thank you both. And just, I know very quickly, because we're about to close, there was a final question that I just wanted to answer very quickly. The Democratic Party does control the House and the Senate and the White House. So the question was, why were the payments around Medicaid restricted while the Democrats are in control? And to my knowledge, the Dornan Amendment has never been repealed by Congress. This is still in full effect. They could do that, I guess, if they wanted to. However, I will note I spent 3.5 years working on federal advocacy, and it is almost August, the annual recess before a midterm election, where people are trying to get home and campaign, and not really much is being done. And so, unfortunately, I don't think before the end of the year this is a priority. But I would, that's just my very quick take on that, because we are running out of time. If I missed anything, Allie, Betsy? No?
I mean, I guess I would just add at this point, somebody who specializes in federal probes would be the person to ask for this. But it is something that has been introduced. The Biden budget, when it was introduced, did not have it in there, and was put back in during the negotiation process. And I think that it's so we've got a step in the right direction, but we haven't yet been rid of it. There was a brief period several years ago where very, very briefly it wasn't in effect. For the most part, it just keeps coming back.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, but hopefully when DC becomes a state, we will have our own control of our own laws. I do see we're over time. So Betsy and Allie, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us tonight. I also want to thank our ASL and Spanish interpreters as well for their great work. And to our audience, thank you so much for spending some of your time with us. The fight to protect abortion access is an ongoing one, and we really appreciate you being a part of it. Please be sure to follow our panelists and ACLU-DC on Twitter, and to support abortion access in the district by donating to the DC Abortion Fund and Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington. We have dropped links in the chat to make it easy for you to donate. They're also on your screen as well. There is something every person here can do to protect and expand abortion access in the district, from talking to your friends and family about statehood, to supporting bills, supporting abortion funds, and other reproductive justice orgs and more. You can learn more at acludc.org. And again, to learn more about DC statehood, please visit dcstatehoodnow.org. Also, please sign up for our emails. All of our social media is on the screen, acludc.org. Sign up for our emails to know when our next action alert is coming, and follow us on social. Finally, please mark your calendars for August 13th at 11 a.m. at the Shaw Library. We will be having a volunteer storytelling training run by ACLU-DC. More information to come. And we really just want to, again, thank you for joining us, and have a lovely evening. Thanks.